it transcends classes, right? Like you said, races. Like, you know, enjoying the groovy music of the time is just universal.
Ladies and gents, this is your host, Trey, speaking to you from the comfort of my own home behind this little microphone, which pulses signals into the proverbial heavens, into a cloud for you to extract at your own discretion. Kind of trippy, don't you think? If I weren't so skeptical, I could conjure up this mystical interpretation for you. However, here you are again, listening to another interview, and that certainly counts for something. And I'm so glad to have you here with me tuning in. You know, what I'm putting out there is a labor of love, a pure, burning desire to bring you the stories of these artists that you come to hear from on this program. And I have to confess something, and this isn't easy for me, but I really need your help. And here's my goal. It's a pretty humble goal, but within the next year, I'd like to have 1,000 regular listeners so that I could justify some bigger guests. One that I've had on my mind would be Slug from Atmosphere. Now, can you just appreciate that for a moment? How cool that would be to have that guy in this format? To hear his own story and commentary about his own songs, what his musings on death are. Now, 1,000 is pretty modest compared to a lot of bigger podcasts out there, of course, but together I think that we can do that modest goal. So think of someone in your life, someone who loves music, who loves to explore the greater depth of the human experience, someone who perhaps listens to too much news and could be better suited with an hour of catharsis and beautiful music instead. And I'm asking for your help to share and grow this program, and you could end up having a bigger impact than just on this show. You could help the very guests that come on this show provide more value to them and give them the recognition that they deserve. And I'll let you in on another thing. When my listenership gets larger, I'd love to promote charities, crowd funds for people who are seeking to seed an artistic project. There's really no limit to what we can achieve together if you simply hit that subscribe button and share this with a friend or two. Now, without further ado, I would like to introduce you to Louie Blackmore. He's a very good friend of mine, and I really hope that you like this interview. As always, stick around so I can give you my goodbyes for the week, and I think I've got a little song for you to enjoy.
Hi, I'm Louie Blackmore. I'm a local musician and music therapist in training.
Did you grow up in Mason City?
Yep, born and raised in Mason City.
Right on. So you kind of moved up here with everyone, and
right. Yeah, we kind of followed you guys.
Yeah,
our crew did. Yeah,
for sure. So tell me a little bit about growing up in the Blackmore home.
So I guess in Mason, or I remember kind of being the organic kid. That was my stereotype in school, but I mean, that was just how we were perceived. So my dad makes hardcore, wholer than whole grain bread that you can't find anywhere else. And so
you had the hippie parents?
Right, yeah, they don't eat much meat.
I remember Dan telling me a story about going over there one night, and your parents made this really delicious lentil soup with blue cheese.
That sounds like a staple. Yeah, my dad's always making kind of meals for the week. He likes to make a big stew or a big soup or a big stir fry. So yeah, he's not cooking every night. And then blue cheese sounds like my dad.
Which that's funny. That's like one of my staple foods now too. I get these sprouted lentils and I'll make soup out of them. And it just kind of reminded me of
nice
that story Dan had told me. So yeah, you don't have any siblings, right?
Nope, just me.
That's something that always interests me, is people who grew up in without siblings, because I just can't, having grown up with a sister who I was really close to, I just can't even imagine what that's like.
Right.
So did you have like cousins or anything?
Yeah,
that
I had
that?
cousins, and but I think I had cousins, but I was never connected with them like brother and sister wise. But I had neighbors who were closer to my brothers than my cousins were, even because I lived with them all the time, and I saw what siblinghood was like through them, all the everything. And honestly, I feel like I experienced siblinghood through, like, I'm married, and with Kim, like, we, like, I can see us fighting like brother and sister also, and we're both only children, so I think that kind of like manifests is a theory of mine, that we're kind of experiencing that as well,
right,
as being married, as having that sibling.
Wait, so she didn't
rivalry. She's an only child, so she's adopted and an only child.
Right, I knew that she was adopted, but I didn't know if she had siblings. So yeah, that just always interests me, because they say that the relationship that you have with a sibling it can be the longest lasting relationship that you have in life, because your friends will move away, you outlive your parents and whatnot. So there's like this psychological thing with some, I'm not like trying to like dredge up anything or anything like that, but like there's sort of a stigma with being an only child,
right?
You know?
Oh, absolutely.
So do you feel like that's affected any way that you ever think about?
Well, I just think that it's important to have the relationships, like you said, with brothers and sisters, that outlasts everything. Like, they're always around, and you have to put up with whatever is going on. So having that bond where you're still connected to them no matter how shitty either you or they are, and you're making it up, so you say maybe really nasty shit to them, but also, and I think that's a really beautiful thing, to be able to express yourself in that way with someone, like really let loose, and maybe people's feelings get hurt, but then you're never holding that back in a relationship, because you feel that way sometimes.
Yeah, like it's almost like you're still learning how to have an interpersonal relationship.
Constantly. Yeah.
And that's an interesting thing to think about too, because even though me and my sister fought like crazy, like fist fights and stuff. Right,
I believe it.
And even being like the older, bigger one, there were times when she would get the upper hand on me.
Yep.
She was really nasty. She'd like spit on me and stuff. Like, siblings can just be.
And Kim knows my weaknesses, and that's where I make that identification. I'm like, when she's really like grinding my gears and knows all my buttons, I'm like, this is exactly like when I was over at blah blah blah's house, and there it's like just this brother sister. It's like, like, get the fuck out of here, like, shut up, all that shit. Yeah.
So you went to public schools in Mason?
Yes. I went to, man, they changed all the names back there now. So I went to Jefferson Elementary, and then John Adams, whatever it is now. And then, the Mason City High School, which was that. There's a great music influence in Mason City, so that was, I appreciate it.
They did have a good music program?
Yeah, I mean, well, just all through the city and in the schools. I mean, Jefferson Elementary, Deborah Hild was my first music teacher, besides maybe a piano teacher I had before elementary school for a little tiny bit. But she was a huge influence, and I remember seeing her later on after I was out of elementary school. She played with like a Dixieland jazz band that did Christmas concerts every year at Nyack, and then they would play at my church sometimes, and that was the beginnings were early on.
So did you start band like in 4th, 5th grade, or?
Yep. Yeah. Picked out instruments the end of 4th grade, and picked percussion. So in 5th grade, I played percussion. Yep. And then all through middle school and high school.
Did you guys have drum and bugle in 4th or 3rd and 4th grade?
No, nothing. We didn't do anything marching until high school, and I don't even think there were bugles involved. But the only marching band I did was in high school.
Well, and we had drum and bugle too, but it was trumpets. It wasn't.
Right.
They weren't bugles, because bugles can be a little hard for a kid to play, because you have to have that.
Are they valveless? Or
they're just a straight horn.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So you have to gauge your breath a lot with them. I don't know much about how to play them, but I just know that it'd be harder to play a song for a group of
mastery.
3rd or 4th grade kids. I don't remember what grade drum and bugle was, but I was in that.
I know they had it over at Newman earlier than they did, I think, in middle school, whereas we didn't start till high school.
As much shit as I've heard talked about the Mason City public schools, my own anecdotal experience of meeting people from Newman, they were a lot crazier.
Yeah,
they partied like
That
they
was
were the
always
ones
my
that,
perspective too. But then when I talked to them, then that, it was the other way around. It was the kids over it,
Huh.
But who knows?
Yeah,
I think we had it right and they were the crazy ones.
I had a couple friends from Newman, and I went to a party with one of them, and his friend was like trying to sell me ecstasy, and we're like in high school and stuff.
Right.
Like, I had never been around that before that point.
Yeah, I was never offered ecstasy in high school, so I guess Newman kind of wins for hardcore partying.
At least our anecdotes.
Right. Yeah, right.
For sure. So yeah, let's I suppose get into music. So you got into percussion, a wide range of percussion instruments? Or?
At first in 5th grade, it was just snare drum, bass drummer, xylophone in the back of the band, alternating with us three in our case, because there were 3 of us in elementary school. So one song I played xylophone, one song I played bass drum, one song I played snare drum. And then in middle school, I started getting into jazz band, which is a lot more cool, in my perspective, and had a lot of fun with that. And my middle school band instructor was also a percussionist and drum set player, so that kind of played to my interests, because he was, he could teach everyone about the instruments, but he was extremely proficient in that sense and kind of, more inspired, knew a bunch of more artists off the top of his head, and that was kind of just more his niche. So that worked out for me, being a percussionist.
Right. So you learned a lot of fusion stuff from him?
Right.
Or?
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's absolutely beyond my my knowledge even still, but I learned a lot of my chops from Mr. Anderson. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Jazz is it still eludes me to this day. Like, I got super interested in jazz when I had first met you. Even I remember trying to get into jazz guitar because Grant Green was just like my hero at the time. And I don't know if it's just the polyrhythmic, like, sort of nature of jazz, but just the rhythm itself.
Well, it absolutely is. I went to a drum clinic at my favorite drum shop just a week or 2 ago here, and a guy who tours with, I mean, I can't think of any of the artists. The guy is JT Bates, and he, a couple times during his presentation, kind of alluded to, not guesswork, but he was saying, I kind of make up a rhythm, and maybe it's a polyrhythm that I don't know. And it was nice to hear that someone who's touring and has been doing this for like 20 years as a career musician even feels that kind of like elusive, about the polyrhythmic, it's pretty mysterious, like, and it was comforting for me to hear him talk about it that way too, because that's exactly how I feel about it, that it's pretty hard to understand, even though I know that I like it.
Yeah, I've got so much respect for jazz and the musicians, but I certainly, when I was playing music, couldn't emulate.
Right.
Definitely.
That's what keeps it interesting.
Yeah. So I remember going over to your place one time when you and JD and Zach were still doing Zulu Do. Was that the name?
Well, that would have been me, Dakota, and Zach, because that's Zach, Louie, and Dakota for the Zulu Do.
Okay.
But yeah, that was us, and we were, before we lived there, after high school while we were going to Nyack, but before we moved in, we had the drums, the whole jam set up in the living room, so it was way loud out in the street. But eventually we moved down to the basement. I don't know where in that process. I don't know if you saw us in the living room in the basement.
That would like in a guest house or something.
Yeah, that would have been the same house, but it either been in the basement when we were living there, probably in the basement by the time we were hanging out with you guys, because we've been going to Nyack. Or maybe not. But anyway, that was that was Zulu Do, and that, like, from there, pieces of that band are still in, Zach and JD, and then myself and Dan form our current band. Mm-hmm. And then from, we had a couple groups in between there with similar members, a few different people and a few of the same people that have made up the groups that have, that I've been a part of since high school.
Yeah.
Right. So Zach has always been a part of it, and then JD, after Zulu Do, JD had been, was in a lot of our groups, and then Dan, once we got up here, kind of took the reins and played a lot of his original material up here, and that was a lot of fun.
Right. Yeah, and I remember seeing on the walls in there, that was like your dad's like art studio kind of. And
Right,
he had a lot
yeah.
of really interesting like abstract self-portraits and whatnot.
Yeah, there was one that was in one of our bedrooms. I'm pretty sure we kept it up while we were living there, that he had drawn just looking into a mirror without, looking down at the paper.
Oh, okay.
And that was always amazing to me, considering how accurate it was, but that
Yeah.
was the story behind it. And then, yeah, there were a lot of more abstract ones than that self-portrait. He's a pretty abstract guy.
Yeah.
In his art form, yeah.
Yeah, I can't even imagine how you would do that. How you can draw without looking at what you're doing.
I think he had something above between his arms and his face.
So he's kind of using his
he had maybe paper over it or something, but he was looking like it wasn't allowed, as far as I remember him telling me. It wasn't like he just wasn't looking at it, quote unquote. I think he had kind of a board, so he was drawing underneath a board and looking into a mirror on top. I'm pretty sure.
So you can't even use your peripheral.
Right. Yeah. That's I think it was supposed to be pure in that sense. Yeah.
So your dad's obviously artistic.
Right.
What other artistic mediums did he get into?
Well, I took voice lessons from Terrence Shook, who had taught at Luther College. After going, he had taught in Broadway in New York and had studied in Austria and just had this way cool history. But he was living in Norris Springs in my middle school and high school years, and someone from middle school took piano lessons from him, which I started doing, and then one day I sang for him, which is more of my comfort instrument, if you will. And then eventually we started doing a piano lesson, then a voice lesson, and eventually we cut out the piano, and I just took voice lessons from him for quite a few years after that. And my dad started taking voice lessons from him because we just both loved. He was like a well of knowledge, and just like you can't find someone like Terrence. And he eventually passed away my senior year. But we were both really grateful to have that opportunity. So he took voice lessons from Terrence for a while. But before that, he hadn't been formally trained in music in any way, although he had music around the house and sang while I was growing up and was in the choir, but he hadn't, past high school done anything.
So did you go to Nyack too and do music classes there?
Yep. So I transferred. Yeah, I did music and psychology, and then transferred to Augsburg for the music therapy. So I did 2 years at Nyack.
Because I've heard, even though there's like this sort of view that Nyack which is the community college near where we're from, that it's got this stigma of just being a shitty community college in rural, Iowa, but I hear their music programs are actually pretty good from Dan and a couple other people. Right.
Well, what I've experienced at Nyack and now Augsburg is that schools are a lot what you put into it. I mean, it's not, of course, the quality of the professors is important, but there were people who were in the music program that I was in at Nyack who, were constantly kind of demeaning it. And honestly, I look back on it, and after being in both Nyack and Augsburg choir are non-auditioned choirs, whereas the high school choir I was in is an auditioned choir. So that for me was kind of weird. It changed the quality. There were people who wouldn't have gotten into my high school choir who were in my both of my college choirs. So that was nice for inclusion, but that puts a certain effect on quality. Yeah. That being said, I loved my professors, John Clemes and Jason Reiner at Nyack. They helped me immensely, and at Augsburg, I chose to go there because of the professors in the music program. But then while I was at both schools, there were always complaints to be formed about either program. Like the music therapy program is being reformed right now at Augsburg because it really should be a master's program. You can finish it in 4 years if you take 18 to 22 credits a semester and, do fantastic. But really, all other therapy programs are mastered programs, art therapy, whatever. Music therapy is literally only one that's not. And that's going to change in not too long. And we're dealing with that adjustment right now. So we're kind of cramming in a bunch of things into this 4-year degree. It's virtually impossible. And then at Nyack, my main complaint was that I think college choir should be auditioned. That being said, some people haven't done choir until college, and they should have that opportunity.
Yeah.
but I think maybe that should be a separate opportunity personally.
It's really sad when you see someone that has a really great voice, but they probably just didn't have proper instruction, and they don't know how to hold, tone and everything.
This might be a good transition to the Music Together, because when I was recently trained in the Music Together program, what that addresses and what this is for listeners is a program which parents and kids attend, and an instructor will conduct an immersive music experience which includes many musical components that children often don't experience, like minor modalities, different time signatures, and whatnot, to make their music vocabulary more complete at an early stage, just like people would learn a language early on.
Right.
So should they learn music?
Makes sense.
Right.
So this Music Together thing, you got introduced to it through Augsburg? Or?
Right. I was doing a practicum, which is like an internship. It's like a pre-internship, because I'll actually be doing my internship after I graduate. So that's me being in the field, experiencing different populations. So I was with Jessica Lee at the Children's Hospital, and she also has a private practice where she works full-time at the Children's Hospital, but also manages a Music Together center where she hires. Now, I've been trained as a teacher. I did an intensive weekend, so she hires teachers like me, hopefully here in January, to teach her at her center. So classes are organized, numbers increase, hopefully. And yeah, that's her side business, is managing that program and hiring music therapists and other trainers.
Now, and you mentioned before we hit record that you even go as far down as the infant level of training.
Correct.
Which is that really seems abstract to me, because at that point, we know that during, I think it's like between 4 months and like 16 months, those are the times when you're learning the most in life, like as far as like how much information you're taking in about your outside world. So I guess that would be a
like
paramount
an open
time.
jar that like all your experiences, just filling you up. And
obviously they don't know a language at that point to conceptualize everything that you're trying to teach them. So have you seen the infant training program or?
Yes. Well, I guess I haven't seen the infant training program, but in the sessions that I've observed, they're usually up to 4 years old, because it's 0 to 4 is the age range that's accepted. I'm sure they, have a little leniency. But so there will be maybe 1 to 4 infants max in one of the classes I've observed, and there will always have been someone who's 2 to 4 years old who can at least make some sounds and is not just, kind of taking it all in.
Yeah.
And that's one of as an instructor, what we're encouraged to tell the parents, like some kids you'll see participate immediately, and some kids they're going to have to take it in for a while before you're going to see, them, give anything back. But it's still important for them to have that stimuli.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So can you take me through what one of those classes is like?
Yeah. So the instructor, be there a little early. Parents show up. If it's cold, we're getting the kids' coats off, take all our shoes off and go into the music room. And then a 45-minute immersive music experience begins. And my job as the instructor is to, of course, create this interest. I'm singing and showing them that it's fun, and then that's also the parents' jobs. So even if the kids aren't necessarily participating, they're observing myself and the parents participating in a fun social music experience, and that's gonna affect how they view that in the future, how they relate to music in the future. And what's being included that a lot of kids won't experience, especially in the earlier years, are, as I mentioned earlier, different modalities, different tonalities, where we purposefully sing in the kids' range. So like all songs are like, you figure out, where the notes are going to be, and you put it in the range that kids are usually able to sing in. And these different types of experiences just kind of broaden their music vocabulary for the future. And so we'll do anywhere from 10 to 14 songs, one of which towards the end is a lullaby, so we're not sending all the parents out with kids who are all hyped up. But we also
That's
do
smart.
have, right, exactly, yeah, we're a business, we want them coming back. And another activity is, of course, a dance along, because the kids can't be sitting down the whole time. But there's a kind of a formula to include so many variety of music experiences within each lesson to have a complete experience.
Yeah.
Is the idea. And each one's 45 minutes, but it's kind of broken up into sing a few songs. Now we're getting up and running around. So for the kids, it feels like a lot of different things are happening. They're not just sitting there for 45 minutes.
Right.
Right.
So are you sitting there with an instrument singing too, or
There's some instrumentation and some recorded music. So there are some big drums that we roll out, or that we have the ability to roll out, that are big enough that 4 people can play on them, or the babies can hop
sure
on
the
them.
kids love that.
Exactly. Right. And then other stick songs where we're clacking sticks together, or we have little like one xylophone bell that you get a mallet with, and then pass out a couple tones, so we create kind of a group song creation experience with the parents and the kids.
Sure.
Yeah.
So it's more of like a cathartic experience for the kids. It's not as much like you're actually trying to like get them to learn notes or anything.
The big
right?
distinction between music together is it's not academic.
Right.
It's
sure.
I forget the word that we. Anyway, it's not academic. It's informal. That's what I'm looking for. It's an informal environment. So we're introducing kids to concepts. We're not demanding any level of performance from anyone. We're just offering them and inviting participation of any kind.
Right.
Even if it's pretty much not participation, running around the room, whatever. There's still everyone is having fun around.
Yeah,
them.
they're in that environment.
Exactly.
And the music is around.
They can't escape it. Yeah.
That's really exciting though. I like that this is a thing that's out there.
Me too.
Because I feel like music is a way for cultures to come together, and that's a big part of why I even started this project. And we were talking about hip hop before we hit record. Hip hop has been a way for people to come together and break down these tribalist barriers that we have of race and class and whatnot, because most people who have came up in our general generation, I'm a little older than you, but still we've come up in a time where hip hop is more appreciated as an art form and an expression of poetry than previously. When it started in the 80s, it was seen as this racial thing, but I guess it doesn't start at hip hop either, does it? Jazz was a really big way for cultures to come together.
Yeah.
And adopting not just black and white in America, but the Latino community too has taken a lot from their popular music from jazz and fusion.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, it transcends classes. It right, like you said, races. Like enjoying the groovy music of the time is just universal. Right. So yeah, it's really important.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the cool thing about music is the way that you break those boundaries is you're all there in a moment, sharing that moment together. Like everybody's kind of in sync. You have to be experiencing music.
Absolutely. Right. So. Yeah, and that's what's so special is that any one music experience is exactly that. It's unique. You can play whatever song again, you can play with whatever group of musicians again, but any one experience is just is that, and it's kind of sacred in that way that it will never be again.
Right. And you can replicate it again.
Right.
And that's totally what songs are all about, I suppose. That's why we go and see.
And
our
that's why we
bands.
do. You try to capture that, what you hear, and that's why you play a song. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny. I was talking to this guy who used to follow around the Grateful Dead, and I don't know if I mentioned this at all, but it's something I bring up a lot about improvisation. So I've seen Fish live plenty of times, and you you get kind of tired of listening to a jam band after a while. Like it is exciting. They're making new music every time because it's all improvised, but it's still kind of like the same song over and over again.
Right.
Because even though these are really dynamic musicians, they still are playing within their style, you know,
and
listening
within
to
a
them
form
for
of whatever song. Yeah.
Because they're still constrained to the chord progression or scale that they're working in. So yeah, but after 4 hours and 2 nights in a row,
right,
I get pretty tired of it, you know.
Yeah.
So I can't even imagine following around these bands, and they like to say it's the same. It's like a different song every time. Yeah, it kind of is. It's kind of not. Like, I just can't fathom following around a band like that. I like to see the bands that I like coming to town when they do.
Right.
I can't imagine touring with
a touring.
band.
I mean, even as a band, touring is taxing, but touring with a band, I've never been inspired enough to do so.
Yeah.
And I love a lot of musicians.
Sure. So tell me this, how do you keep it exciting when you play a song over and over in rehearsal with a band, and then how do you keep it exciting for yourself while you're playing? I mean, you obviously love what you're doing, but it does it in any way get boring? And I suppose you probably haven't gotten to this point. I mean, you're obviously not a touring musician doing this every night, you know,
right,
being jaded with playing the hits or anything like
right,
that. But you still are. You're still playing your same repertoire.
Right. Yeah, and the bands we've been in, like, it's not our job. So we put together a set list, and then we don't put together a brand new one. We tack songs on. So essentially, we're playing what we always play, and that does become taxing. But in the bands that I've been in, it's not been so strict. You know, Dan never turned around in the Enigmaknots and, you know, disapproved of anything. So there was a lot of room for creativity. So even though we were playing the same songs, just having that, you know, just being allowed to be creative with my part in the way that I wanted to was enough for me. But yeah, I mean, like you said, I don't do it every night. So yeah, we'll see how I handle it if I ever do.
Yeah. Well, and the good thing is you are going into this music therapy sort of career. So, I mean, your life is going to kind of be music, but it's not like your Aerosmith or Kiss going around playing the same songs every night. And,
well, music therapy, the studies that I've been doing, my time at Augsburg has really opened my eyes to, I kind of viewed music in a really limited way. Because when you enter therapy and like the Music Together program that we were talking about, it's not a formal environment. Like I said, the quality isn't required of the kids because we're learning, and that, you know, like letting down that wall where like you're not striving for perfection kind of allows for a lot more fun, and then you realize that that's the point of music in the first place. It's fun. Right. You kind of remember that, and you're like, Absolutely. Oh yeah, shit. That was the point in the first place. So that's been a big realization for me, is that setting aside perfection and whatnot, like just enjoying the experience. And even if I'm making kids music, like those kids really have fun with that. And if it was just me alone, wouldn't be singing those songs, but because of how they enjoy it, that makes it exponentially more, you know, like that, you know, lights up my soul. That's great. Yeah.
Isn't it fun though? Just working with kids, and even something as simple as a 3-chord song can enlighten the experience by just the youthfulness in the room and just. Yeah.
Right. I mean, the silliness, we actually talk about that in training for that, the silly quotient. Like you're bringing, you know, you're teaching them to be silly, because it's an important, you know,
Absolutely.
thing to do. Right.
People should embrace that more, because once you get older and you have to uphold this sort of facade for people at work, like it's odd, man. I'm a completely different person at work almost, you know, like I put on, I mean, obviously, like I have my own personal charm, but I put on a professional facade when I'm at work.
Right. And yeah, to be able to break free of that completely is refreshing.
Yeah, and that's where music comes into my life. When I go out to live music, I'm not really the type to get like go and dance or anything, but I do like to kind of lose myself in a crowd and sort of become part of the hive, if you will.
Right, absolutely, yeah. When I'm at a good concert, or even an okay concert, you can get to that spot where you're not thinking about, because obviously your feet are hurting sometimes or whatever. Yeah. But
especially
they
at the
can.
Skyway.
Yep, especially at the Skyway, going diagonal on your feet.
Yeah, such a silly venue. Like why would you do that?
I guess it's
a lot of good bands come through.
Wasn't a theater before? I think that was the story. Yeah, right.
I knew that right when we walked in. I was like, this used to be a movie theater. Like what?
But yeah, even with a all right concert, you can get taken away and not be thinking about your whole any uncomfortability in your body, and just to be totally enjoying the experience. And yeah, like you said, get kind of lost in the crowd, and that's really, for me, that's important. Like I need to do that once in a while. It's an important feeling.
That was the thing about my prejudice against the Skyway. All comes from watching a band that really isn't too. I mean, it's interesting what Les Claypool and Sean Lennon were doing,
right?
But it didn't make you want to move. I mean, you just kind of sat there and like zoned out because it was that kind of music.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, kind of trancey.
So I'm just standing there this whole time on this elevated plane, this ramp, more or less, and don't realize how much that hurts your back.
Right, yeah, and I mean, like dancing on it too, I can't imagine that's good either. Like if you were moved to dance, that might be a problem too on that floor.
A staple there is EDM music, and that's what I was thinking. I was like, wow, like you gotta have ravers like tripping on acid and ecstasy, like falling over each other, like in this place. Like what? How does this work? And then they have a VIP section, which they just left some of the chairs up there.
Right.
So, do people actually pay to more?
I'm assuming so. Yeah, if you go to so many shows and you have another coming up that you want to go to, but you know that you don't want the experience of standing on the floor, I would could see paying the extra $1.
I can see why it would be fun though, especially an EDM situation, because I can just imagine seeing like a really good DJ there and it just being off the chain.
Right. Yeah. I mean. Yeah, you've got to reach a point of inebriation where the floor is less of an inconvenience and more of kind of a fun thing.
Sure, inebriation through just the sheer joy of music, or
whatever your path.
Right. I'm curious a little bit on the whole music therapy aspect of your education. Mm-hmm. This is something that I really hope that I could tap into, because I do know. And again, this is a huge part of why I'm doing this project, is music has been such a huge part of my life. Like I don't know what kind of person I would be unless I had found the local music scene that was around in North Iowa. And I'm sure listeners of this program are going to get this story plenty of times, but just for context, hardcore was a big deal when I was in high school and stuff, and I didn't really fit in with a lot of the graduating class that I was going to high school with. They cared about was football and wrestling and basketball. I just didn't give a shit about them. I didn't give a shit about coming in, and it was probably because I was outside of them culturally. I don't know. Like I was sort of an outcast. Right. Not to sound cliche, but anyway, I came to find that there was this phenomenon of local music, and I would go to these shows. And I remember when I was like 15 or 16, I remember I didn't have a car, so I must have been 14 or 15. And I paid someone to give me a ride over to Garner, and there was this girl I was meeting for the first time, and it was like my first girlfriend, and we saw this show, and it was a local band, Puking on Mannequins. I still know of these guys. I ran into the bass player actually at a show at the Cedar Cultural Center on West Bank.
It's a great
that place
venue.
is awesome.
They have great musicians come through. Yeah,
I should hit that place up more for, like I was saying, the whole cultural aspect of sort of enveloping myself into other cultures.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, and that's like their whole point. Like, but anyway, I ran into that guy there, and yeah, that was finding that subculture was really big for me because that's how I met a lot of friends outside of. I hung out with Dan. He was a grade below me, and a bunch of his friends too.
Yeah, I forgot you were even in their grade. Yeah.
No, I was a year. Yeah, I was a year older than them. I was young for my grade, So, even at 1 year matters a lot when you're in high school and stuff like that. Yep. So
yeah, if only the license thing, and then everything else. Yeah.
Yeah, but God, once you get into your 20s, it starts to matter a hell of a lot less. And I feel like the older you get, numbers.
And I learned after high school the importance of hang out with other people your age. Or when I did my training for music together, a lot of ladies over 50 were training who were already teachers, and meeting different perspectives are really important. Yeah.
So yeah, finding this it started off this band Puking on Mannequins. They were more punk. They weren't really hardcore, but there were a lot of bands that they played with locally that were hardcore. So it kind of gave me something to like identify with. And the whole hardcore like Christian hardcore thing is like being straight edge and whatnot. And there was a period in my childhood where I quit hanging out with a certain group of people that I was smoking weed with, and sort of like went all in on this like straight edge thing for a really short amount of time. But anyway, it was a way for me to identify with people and let off steam. I mean, the whole hardcore thing is you like get into the pit and throw kicks at each other basically into the air, but you kick your buddies.
I mean, what people are looking for in music varies so much, and then of course that's why you have that. Maybe you and I don't like country, maybe someone else doesn't like the music you're just describing, but other people live for getting in the pit and punching somebody.
Yeah, and I understand. I'm in a crazy small minority in that I wouldn't do it anymore.
Right.
I'm no longer part of that minority. But it's a necessary
part of your growth.
Yeah. I needed to be young and pissed off and full of a pool of hormones just willing to act out on any impulse, and that's what it was all about for me at that point. But more importantly than that was I met friends. Like I now have lasting relationships with people.
Taking a break on the side made a connection with someone.
Yeah. I mean, one of the people I met is a guy that runs that Up Down in Uptown, the arcade bar.
Uptown,
he moved up from Iowa City and started that place.
I didn't know. That's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think he just works for them. I don't think he's like necessarily a partner or anything like that. But he's pretty involved in the company. But anyways, it was it's really cool. Just I wouldn't know so many people from Iowa if it weren't for that music scene. And it would be surprising the more and more that social media became a thing, you were able to see these connections of people you would have never thought would have known each other from different towns.
Right.
I remember going to a show with Senseless Beauty.
Yep, I was going to ask when you said about that scene if
Yeah, I knew those guys really well. I know the Biermans. I rode down for a show with them because I was friends with a guy named Corey Dury. Who did a lot of promotion for a lot of those hardcore bands.
Gotcha.
I would help him put on shows at the Rose Bowl, actually.
Nice,
when I was, yeah.
Right, that was one of the, three, there's Rose Bowl, we played Walk and Roll a bunch.
Yeah.
There's not much in our hometown, but...
I don't remember, I never went to any Walk and Roll shows, but we would always get shows at the American Legion and the Rose Bowl.
Nice.
Those were the two places that we would always get, and we would get like some pretty big bands. There was a band called Arsonist Gets All the Girls from California. They were pretty big at the time. And this is all like really esoteric stuff. Like you'd have to be involved in the hardcore scene to know who they were. But,
were you guys tacking posters? What was your...
No, it was all social media.
Okay.
That's how we...
Right, okay.
I would help him promote on social media and be the door dude. And we got a band, Amur. They're bigger now.
I'm sure recognizing fewer and fewer of these. They're more of a scene than I thought in Mason.
Yeah. But anyway, there was one time I went down to a show with the guys from Senseless Beauty and like an ex-girlfriend was there that I would have never, you know, because she hangs out with the same kind of crowd. So it's just amazing when you really get into your subculture how small of a world it is. But anyway, to get back to the whole music therapy thing and to derail my own personal story, I'm super curious to see the science behind this, because I know there has to be some pretty compelling scientific stuff.
That is, of course, the definition. If anyone ever asks the question, what's the difference between music therapy and therapeutic music, it is the scientific notion behind it.
Crux.
Well, I mean, so this is, I don't get as bent out of shape about it as many people I know of in the music therapy profession. But the one thing that arises is, of course, we go to school for 4 or 5 years, whatever, to become music therapists, and then someone else is playing at a nursing home or whatever, and someone else who doesn't know calls that music therapy, and then we who went to school, la-di-da, get offended by that. Once again, not really me, but what's behind that is that music therapy, by our definition or by the definition, has a scientific process. So we are quantifying, or in qualitative research or qualitative practices, gathering like doing interviews or taking measurements in quantitative ways, so that our objectives are directed by some kind of we make purposeful decisions.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So the music we use has reason to it.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, that distinction is lost on anyone who hasn't gone through the music therapy program.
Sure. Yeah.
So the argument is kind of moot, because by the time you explain it, anyway, someone just saying it just doesn't quite know. Right. You're right. Yeah.
Sure. So I'm sure you've learned quite a bit about the potential of music therapy. Why don't you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, it's population specific to an extent, as in we say we work with anyone from the womb to the tomb. So they're literally Jessica Lee, who I mentioned earlier. In addition to Music Together, her other business, which I don't know as much about since I haven't gone and observed, involves birthing and music therapy. For birthing is in replacement to an extent. I'm not sure what extent, and I'm sure it varies. In replacement of pain medication. So.
Oh, okay.
Right. So we're using music preferences from the mother in that case. And what the music therapist would do would take the selected music from the mother and then organize it in a way that is conducive to the labor process. And I believe, once again, I haven't studied this aspect much, but so you're having, different intensities or tempos of music to set different moods at different, while you're in labor, and then while, afterwards, of course, is a different mood, and you're capturing these moods in the music preferences that have been offered, and designing a listening playlist to kind of guide the mother through.
See, I was wondering if it would be like live music, like someone playing guitar.
That is, in theory, the best. There are many more studies. So then from the womb, we move on to afterbirth, neonatal care units. There have been many studies performed comparing live music to recorded music, and it's clear from the physiological response of young babies that they can tell, or there's a difference or a more positive response from live music as opposed to recorded music. Just, somehow the presence,
you probably lose a lot with compressed audio too, because most of the time we're playing MP3s, which are grossly, compressed, and they don't have the dynamic range of an analog. Even if you played I'm curious to know if you were to play like a record, you know, if that would have a different.
Just comparing MP3 to like a vinyl, that would be an interesting study to see if even that change, would be noted in neonatal.
But during this is what I'm curious about is during the birthing process, like if you're playing music that's more soothing during times when they're having contractions, when they don't need to push or something, and then you play like more intense, like you're crescendoing at Beethoven's whatever.
Right.
You know, I'm not sure what.
And it'd be, of course, whatever the mother. We're working with the mother's music preferences in that case. So be it a punk rock mom or a mom who's into Beethoven. You're looking for a more intense moment.
Yeah.
At one part of the birthing process than you are at the other. And I don't want to sound like an expert because I'm
just looking into tapping into what you've learned, because if you've gone to school for this for so long, I'm sure
just in the specific neonatal, like we can move on. So there's the womb, neonatal, and then where I am more of an expert than in neonatal would be, ages 0 to 4, which is the age range that I'll be working with in Music Together. And while Music Together is slightly more educational, even though it's informal compared to education, than is music therapy. Music Together, we do have kind of a curriculum where in music therapy you're working with individual needs and setting goals that way instead of just going through a year. Or music therapy has like 4 years, or Music Together has 4 years worth of curriculum that they rotate through. Whereas music therapy would be client focused, and you'd be assessing the client and then designing a curriculum based on their needs instead of how the program works in Music Together's case.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So when you can use music in, like, let's say, did you learn anything about, let's say, someone with post-traumatic stress disorder? I know that there's a lot of studies out there now with the use of maybe a psychedelic like LSD or MDMA. Mm-hmm. I'm curious. You would have to get some sort of benefit from music involved with these revolutionary therapy programs. Do you know anything about that? Well,
there is a guy that I go to school with, Samuel Ritchie, who I believe that's kind of where he's got a veteran-laden family, I believe. So that's kind of his he's got his sights set on working with people with PSD or veterans in other senses. So I guess once again, as in with neonatal, I can't speak too much to that, but I do know that music therapy is heavily involved in that, but none of my practicum experiences have been anything that can really speak to that. I haven't worked with veterans to any capacity.
Right.
So I don't know the process. I'm sure always we're working with music preference. So, I mean, it's going to be personal. But then from there, we would also need to consider their music experience and what they're capable of. So, like, can they sing along with us, or do they want us to be playing to them since they don't have the capacity to be singing along? Or if they do, if they can't sing well but it doesn't bother them, in music therapy, that's not a problem. If they're getting enjoyment out of it, that's fine. But in another case where someone doesn't have the ability to sing and they know that, then we might have to find a different intervention that of course doesn't involve them feeling uncomfortable, because that's not therapeutic.
Right. And I guess I just realized that I'm sort of thinking of like if you're doing a music therapy program with kids, I'm thinking of it being more interactive, and then I'm thinking of with adults, I'm thinking of it more of being an audience than of being interactive. But I would imagine that you would benefit a lot from interacting with music in your therapy if that were the course you were going.
That is a lot. Music as a social experience is a lot of what music therapy is made up of. But like I was saying, you have to, work with what a patient is comfortable with. So if they're not into creating the music, then you're kind of working to find a way where the music is around and maybe they can, instead of singing along, like they're keeping a simple beat on whatever. Or you can even listen, like you can do music listening and music therapy and then simply discuss like what that music means to them. Like it doesn't have to be the creation of the music. Like that's one angle to take.
Sure.
But they can show you what they like to listen to, and then you could have an in-depth conversation about, what all that means to them. And there could be, just the music that they showed you, and then that could be all involved in a session.
Sure. So I know that creating music can have a really great impact on you emotionally. For me, when I was playing music, I was probably going through a lot of shit, and even though I never got very good at it, and I never really got to know music theory all that well, just playing with music and knowing that you can, create these sounds is pretty cathartic anyways. Right. So
I don't know, do you have Netflix? Doesn't matter. If anyone has Netflix that's watching this, there's I Dream of Wires is a movie on Netflix about the creation of synthesizers. So I just watched it, and I need to watch it again to really get everything. But one of the things they discuss in that documentary is how the synthesizer enabled people who didn't have formal music training to purchase, an instrument that they could create on regardless of their experience. Like they might not know exactly what was going on, but instead of, getting handed a flute or a guitar or whatever, where there's a lot of technique involved, you get this keyboard instrument now that you can create different sounds on and be a composer, even though you haven't had any training in that, and kind of how that just, suddenly everyone could be a composer with that technology. But anyway, I recommend that on that thought.
I'll have to check that out for sure. So, so being a musician yourself, you have some original material. What are you planning to share with us?
Well, I've got 2 complete songs, and then one that I have never really finished, but I got a loop pedal this year, so it helps fill a few things out.
There you go.
So I was going to take a swing at making it a whole clip. So one of them was commissioned by my father. It is called Sob Song, because I got a hand-me-down sob when I was 16 that had my parents, my dad loved sobs, so my mom and dad both had one. And when I was growing up, and then I got one of theirs when I got my license, and it pooped out on me one day. And so
really expensive.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it was not in my personal budget to do anything about that. So my dad said he commissioned a song in, return for getting me back on wheels.
Oh, right. Yeah, you were telling me this.
Right. So that's what's behind Sob Song. So it's just a blues about when my car broke down, and it was commissioned so I could get another car more speedily than paying for one myself. just decided to get out. Check what the fuss was all about. The news we gave him made him scream. The shattering his romantic dream. And then the other song I'll be playing was, I believe, it was one of the first songs I ever wrote. It's kind of an acoustic-y song that is tentatively titled The Love, because I've never thought of anything else for it. But it's complete. And then there's one called Neon Lights that, you know, is eventually going to have another part. But that was my third one that I'm bringing to the table.
So do either of those two have lyrical content?
Yes. Yep. They all have lyrical content. Neon Lights has just a chorus, and a couple verses right now. And I've been trying to kind of write it into another one of my songs. And I tried to do that once again this week. Didn't happen. But, you know, it's like a 1 to 2 minute song as itself right now, but it has a future destination. Hasn't reached its destination.
And what's it about? What does it mean to you?
It is very metaphorical, and I honestly don't know if I could recall my original inspiration, but
it's usually what happens with
I mean,
your
you know, and they're kind of all teenagey songs. They don't all reek of depression, but they're kind of in that vein.
More angsty.
Right. Yeah, they've all got some angst. Yeah.
Okay. And then what was the one before Neon Lights?
The Love? Yeah, that's I don't like saying that title out loud. I've never decided on anything else for it. And that was one of the first songs I wrote that's just the content, you know, I don't like to get too specific in my songs because I like to leave it open to interpretation, but I like to try to create lines that make me feel something, and you know, and hope that happens for someone else. Summer is gone and the leaves have passed on from the trees that had bore them so long, holding them through the cold, lonely nights when I was sleeping tight. No need to fight for those I love to be alright. Twice, maybe more. I understand what it is you don't see. So let's light up the band, leave your shoes, take my hand, and we'll meander into the dark. For when it comes crashing through, there's nothing you can do.
Yeah, that is sort of a trademark for a good song, right? When you listen to, or at least good poetry, where you feel like it was written for you.
Exactly.
You know, so you take this personal experience and you make it a common story that anyone could relate to. So, yeah, I can see where you're going with that.
Right. Yeah, that was the goal. And I played in the band with Dan, the Enigmaknots, and his lyrical prowess always leaves me awestruck. So I'm never writing as many. You know, I'm very picky. I'll kind of try something and then scrap it, so I don't have a lot of output because of that. I've got high standards, so not a lot makes it off the runway.
Dan is an excellent poet. You know, I used to write a lot of poetry when I was younger, and I really wish I would have hung on to it, because I had a whole notebook just full of poetry, and I either burned it or got rid of it or something, because I was just like, this sucks. This is just my teenage angst. Like,
right.
But I really should have kept it, because who knows, like, how valuable that'll be to you personally, or you just never know, what it's going to mean, mean for you later. Yeah,
and like with these songs that'll be tacked onto this interview, they're from way early on. I haven't been writing anything lately, but just in the sense that they're from my past, and it's maybe not something that I would write now, but it's still, it still has importance.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Regardless of being somewhat of the past. Those neon lights are gonna be the death of me. Those neon lights are gonna one day set me free. Those neon lights are gonna be the death of me. Those neon lights are gonna one day set me free. When they are behind me, they push me through the dark. I know they're there to guide me, there to give me spark. Those neon lights are gonna be the death of me. Those neon lights are gonna one day set me free.
So here's something I like to close on is the concept of mortality and what that means to you. So can you tell me a moment in your life when you realized your mortality?
Yes. Yeah, we had a little email or Facebook conversation about this, and that description that you said about realizing your mortality reminded me of this obscure dream I woke up from. Well, I guess it wasn't that obscure at the time, but now it feels more obscure now. That I ran downstairs and I don't know, my dad at least wasn't in bed yet, and he was sitting on the chair, and I just cried for a while because it's such a it was like one of the first times that I really thought a huge thought, just this huge thought. And the dream was something like everyone has a life, and it went in a story mode, so I guess I experienced myself as every kind of creature or being. So everyone is a flower, everyone's a tree, and you live that, and then and you do your tree life, and like every animal or whatever. And it was just such a big thought that it scared me. But it was also, in addition to kind of that Buddhist recycling of life thing that was in the dream, there was that realization of death every time. And there was for me in the dream, I kind of experienced it a lot, so it was just scary. Yeah. And I can't really remember what he said to comfort me. I remember I was trying to think really hard about that, but it just was it's just such a huge thought that I hadn't thought before. And it was exactly it was realizing mortality, and I didn't know what to think of it, but it just had me. I cried for a good 10 minutes. I was like, I tried to explain why it was so scary to him. He was like, okay, everyone has a life is something. All right. All right.
Yeah.
But it was, for me, it was really meaningful. And, yeah. And I mean, didn't know what to say about it at the time. Still don't quite know what to say about it. Yeah. But it was just the feeling that it gave me.
Well, we're always kind of fighting that nothinglessness in life. I mean, that's why we do things to distract us. Like, that's why we watch TV. That's why we create music in a way, like to sort of distract us from our existential angst.
Yep.
And I do like that you can remember that time, because I feel like I have, in being that I've asked that question to every one of my guests so far, about half of them don't remember that point. And I wonder if it's like just this defense mechanism in our brain where it's like we want to kind of push that back.
That would make sense to me, from the psychology classes I have to, repressing something that's absolutely, totally frightening.
Yeah.
Depending on how you frame it.
It is. But I like to embrace that. That's just me. I'm sure not a lot of people have that interpretation. I like dark humor, and don't mind talking about it. Right. But I did bring it up with one of my guests out of nowhere and kind of caught him off guard. And
okay.
So that's why you knew about this beforehand.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's not a bad idea. It's like, like I said, that how big that felt, having that, kind of as a surprise question can bring on some pretty big, scary thoughts.
It can create a lot of dead air too.
Yep. Yeah.
Because it'll catch people off guard. Because it's something you got to think about. And why I incorporated it into this is that is something I've always been interested in, because I've always been in my own head about my own experience with realizing mortality. So I'm always curious about other people's, but when you're just hanging out with someone, like, how do you bring that up? Like, this is a really good excuse for me to be like, you kind of, I've got a purpose. Yeah. Hey, people are going to listen to this. I got to have something juicy. And I can only hope that people look forward to this segment, later on. But yeah, I think we'll wrap things up.
Cool.
I'd like to thank you for taking your time to drive out here into the middle of nowhere suburb land.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, pulling in, it was almost kind of like a little more hilly than Clear Lake, but it was kind of felt like being around in Clear Lake.
That's what I like about here. Other than the rent being cheap, it's kind of nice to be in a small town that it has the comfort of Clear Lake without all the people that know me.
Right.
And I'm, 40-minute drive from the cities to go see my live music that I like.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I could see that being nice. Yeah, get a little cramped being in the city. So
yeah.
I could see
Yeah,
that.
and it's cool. This place is just like a 1-bedroom apartment with my own walls. I don't share walls with anyone, so.
I can't wait for that. Hopefully at the next place.
Yeah. But yeah, man, I really like what you're doing with the whole music therapy thing. This new music together thing sounds really cool. So I'm interested to see what you learn and what your experiences.
Yeah,
with
thanks
that,
for having me. I had a good time.
All right, that's all I've got for you this week. Thank you from the very depth of my heart for listening. And remember my stated goal in the intro of this show. Together we can do beautiful things, but no man is an island. And I need your help to branch out to bigger land masses, as it were. So smash that subscribe button, share this show with someone you love who could use an hour of peace and introspection in their week. I'm going to leave you with a song by Bonnie Prince Billy. Go and check that guy out. And here it is. Love you all.